Time it does. We are back. Now I learned because I thought it was gonna be simple. It ain't simple. We are back. It is episode 48 of the Lyrical Ones podcast. As usual, I'm your grateful and present host. So thankful to be here. Sin slash Sineo. You pick and choose. And as always, joined with Alfluent. Alfluent, how are you doing?
I am doing well. I am living. I am verbing. I am thriving. I'm good. Like Schoolhouse Rock in action.
I I feel that schoolhouse rocket action.
How you living?
Um, you know, I started reading a book, The Five Rings by Miyamoto Musashi, and uh, it was talking about Zen, right? The state of Zen, and how to be present in the moment, and how to respond and be reactive, and be aware and have a sense of self in the present tense. And so I'm doing my best to be present, to be in the moment, to have gratitude and thanks, and not to get lost in the future, and to not get trapped in the past.
That's it.
Yeah,
Well,
doing what I
it's
can.
it's hard to be trapped in the past when it keeps leaving, right? It's like your mind can stay there, but presently, most of you is right here, right? You can't really visit the future, right? Well, I disagree. So actually, that's not true. I feel like the spirit can leave the vessel, and your consciousness can leave your body, and whether you don't always mean it to, but I know for myself it's happened where I visited moments, ones that I have physically have been to before, right? It's called a memory, right? Then I've also visited moments that I had yet to experience, right? Call it deja vu. And then I experienced things before I learned that they happened. I visited moments before I knew they had happened, and then I was later informed that happened. Before I was given knowledge, before I knew somebody was telling me about them, I had received knowledge and visited those moments. And I can only be confident in in my own experience and and give a report on that. You know, I don't need to know the science behind it to know that these are the memories I have, these are the experiences I have, these are the moments that my spirit, my mind, my heart has you know traveled through.
Man, you opened the door to a whole nother dimension right now, because when you said that, right, it it reminded me the saying that I have, right? It's it's not what you see, it's what you don't see, right? And in the book The Five Rings, there is a line about that, right? The willingness to be able to perceive what's not there, right? And I thought it was like it really struck a chord with me, because there were these different instances in my life where I foresaw, right? Like it was like when you sometimes when you look like at a mathematical equation, you have a gist of what the answer is going to be, or you just know what the answer is going to be, right? Your mind, it goes into the formula and the flow, and then it produces a result even before you write it down. And these events that had taken place were, to me, similar in the sense that, for whatever reason, I had these intuitions, these feelings, and when I would act out on them, they would produce results that would then lead to something tragic, right? And it was
Mhm.
always this idea that it's not what you see, is what you don't see, right? You could have a feeling and you could speak on it. And even then, knowing these certain elements, you just don't know how it's going to come together. And it happened so many times in my life.
Yeah,
I'm thankful when they don't happen, but I'm also thankful when they do, right? Because it gives me a sense of anticipation to prepare for those around me who will be impacted as well. Because it never happens in a vacuum. It always, whatever happens, will impact others. And so, And me being in this position, right? I'm here, I'm speaking as just not for myself, but for people in all of the different communities I live in to show up and be a thoughtful advocate for them. And in that advocacy, there's almost this instinctual kind of nuanced energy, right? Like you said, right? You of the spirit and your consciousness can leave you. And sometimes you're so in the moment, so present that you're so sensitive to what's coming, right? To what's
Right.
happening around you. And so, yeah, when you said that, I was like, oh man, we're going to the metaphysical. We're about to open up another dimension because yeah, like being present is as much about being one with yourself as much it is being one with the world, being one with your people, being one with your family or your friends, or like just being receptive and being open to what's coming, the energy as it exists.
I agree with that.
So, yeah, that hit. I was like, oh man, it got me thinking. Like, I was like a kid. I'll paint the picture for you. I'm a kid. I'm with my friend
Yeah.
and my cousin. We're like, we must have been like 12 to 14, somewhere around there. We're in the parking lot of a hospital. Now to really paint the picture, to kind of zone in, for those that know about San Francisco and the outlying, like the surrounding kind of cities, there's one called South San Francisco. South San Francisco is not San Francisco. They have a doctor's office called Kaiser, right? And so I'm a child in the car waiting for my mom to come back from her doctor's appointment. And I had this moment because it's happened before where I run into other family members there and I'm like, oh, my cousin here, my other cousin. And they're like, what are you talking about? I'm like, look for the car, right? I know the car. They all know the car. I'm like, look for this car. And they're like, what are you talking about? I'm like, the car, is it here? And they're like, no, I don't see it. I'm like, I feel like they in that building. I point at a building, one building in particular. And my mom come back to the car. I'm like, Mom, did you see so and so? And they were like, no, why? I'm like, because I feel like they're here. I feel like they over there. Like, what are you talking about? I'm like, they're here. A week later, the building that I pointed at, we were all sitting in, and I realized that was the ICU. And that was the
Dang.
last time I even knew my cousin was there, right? Because when they told me, oh, go see your cousin, the thing that I told them at the age of 12 was, they're not here. I don't feel them, right? I felt them last week. I don't feel them today. And they're like, what are you talking about? And I'm crying and I'm crying. And everybody else is like, what are you talking about? I'm like, I don't feel it, right? And my mother then highlighted it and was like, you said something about this last week, didn't you? And I was like, yeah. And that same type of event took place multiple times in my life, right? So that's just one where it's like I'm in the moment, I'm present, now I'm in reflection, but in that moment, I'm receptive to the energy and the waves of information that I can't read. I can't. There's no discerning, right? Black and white. It's not arbitrary. It's not this binary thing. It's just it's coming to me, and I'm interpreting it as I can.
Right.
And I think there's something about that in everything. Like, for those that have seen me on Instagram, I freestyle from time to time. They're like, how do you do it? Well, it's practice, it's a discipline, but it gets to the state where I'm just in the moment present. I'm just doing it, right? So yeah, being present is I think it holds a lot of importance in the moment that we're in time, right? We had a conversation about multiple things going on in the world, one of which is people coming across wealth, right? And it's like, I think there's something about being present and being aware of how to do that and acting on the now, right? Because a lot of times we'd be like, oh man, I should have got in on when it was low. I should have got that when it was there. I missed out. But it's like that's gonna happen again. Are you doing something about it in this moment?
Right.
Right. So I think, yeah, it's profound in terms of just being. Oh, you know what's trippy is I can see now that I'm in the. So for those that don't know, those that are like audio only, and those that don't even have insight to this, I'm producing the show today. I'm in a double chair, right? So usually we have a producer. Things happen and it's understanding, but it's weird because now I can see like, oh, we got a like. It looks like we got a like on Facebook. I'm like, yo, how is this what really be going on? This is a trip.
Right.
So, moving along, right? And when it comes to being present, I just want to speak to it in a way that, people can hopefully take something from it, because I think too often we get so lost in anticipation, right? Like, for example, last week I was anticipating this week because I'm thinking about work. I'm thinking about what's going to happen to the position I'm in, the role that I play, and all of these different things that are happening and how I'm taking it, right? I'm taking it because I feel like it's leading up to something. And as I'm building up this anticipation, I'm also building up my anxiety, right? I'm building up this sense of like dread. I'm building up this sense of like, is this going to be of benefit to me, right? And I'm building a case, right? And so it all accumulates when you get in the meetings and you talk to people, and then you realize, no, I'm right where I need to be. I'm doing exactly what I need to do. All of the feelings, fears, and the sentiments that I was holding on to, granted, right? It's due to my experience. It's due to my ability to like want to do my best to hold space for positivity, for healthiness, right? I'm not trying to cause harm, even though they had me ready, right? Based off of last week, based off of what I felt, based off of what I was seeing time and time again, all these different instances had me ready to go. And I realized in the present, right? What is it that I can do for you,
Right.
right? If you're not doing for me, and we have to be here together, right? We have to work together. Then I need to ask myself, as much as it may pain me, what can I do for you? Because if what I find out is I can't do anything for you, then what am I holding on to, right? If you can't do nothing for me, right? So it's one of those things where, sometimes we let these feelings dictate what's to come, or sometimes we don't realize that we're letting our own trauma, we're letting our own fears, right? Because sometimes it is to protect ourselves. Sometimes we have those instinctual moments like, I know what you up to. I know what you really doing. I see what's up. I peep game. Oh, you sending me an email today. Okay, I know what it is. Who else on this email? Because I know you could BCC it. Okay, you could have hit me with a text. You didn't have to. What? Oh, you want receipts because you trying to build a case against me. But then you realize, right? All right, if you're gonna build a case against me, let me counteract that, right? Let me overproduce results, right? Let me astound you with my abilities, right? And then it's like, but what am I doing all this for, right? Am I doing this because it's coming from a place of truth, or am I doing this because I'm afraid? I have anxiety about what's to come. And then being in the present, I think it removes that, right? What being receptive to what can I handle in the moment and take care of
Exactly.
versus, oh, every move that's to come. I think that's it's easy for people to get lost in that, right? There's a balance we must strike. There's a difference between saying I'm preparing for tomorrow and I'm living today versus I'm worried about tomorrow and I'm getting through today, right? It's those key things that you say, the energy that you put out there, what you're giving to it. Like, you got to be mindful, you got to be thoughtful, you have to think about it, right? And being present, right, is just letting yourself sit in the moment and be receptive to what's there.
Yeah. And I think the more you practice, like receiving what's there, I think your capacity to receive information in the moment, right, can increase. Because like you said, right, it is, basically energy, right, that you processing, right? Whether it's sound, heat, right, light, right, kinetic, right, your sensory, right, your sensory um, reception, right, is working. But then you can say, oh, well, what is my investment? Where's the exchange so that I may be able to, right, to participate, right, and be able to give in the moment as well, right? It's like that energy that you invest, right, can, right, then create, right, that anxiety or or the nervousness, or right the tension. And so then you have to like frame the context of the energy, right? Say, how am I going to approach this? Like, what energy am I going to give to it? And right, am I going to give positive energy? Am I going to give negative energy? Right? Am I going to am I infusing hope into this? Right? Or am I infusing dread into this? And a lot of times that will dictate the preconceptions that you have and how you anticipate your navigation in those moments when they arrive.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where it's we oftentimes don't think about how do we challenge what's given to us, right? Like how do we challenge like the process of life, right? And I mean that in the sense of you go to school, you're forced to go to school. Now, depending on the household you grow up in, there's certain information and lessons you're going to learn because your parents are going to do their best to equip you with what they know, with what they have. And oftentimes, the that duality of self happens where it's like, well, I know this is what I'm supposed to be at home, but who do I need to be in this space at school, right? What is my role? What do I do, right? Because my role here is going to be different than the role I have in a family. And
Sure.
oftentimes you don't think about how they sometimes need to be the same, right? They need to, if you don't have that reinforcement to have them appear in the same, like throughout the day, right? It's like, oh, I'm switching my hat because I'm going into this environment. I need to figure out what do I need to navigate. When sometimes what you need to navigate is just being yourself, right? Just being you, right? Which goes into being in the present. But that practice, then it almost escalates as we continue. That identity increases, and that dependency on being seen for who for the identity that's created, whether you did it intentionally or unintentionally, it becomes this thing that's now the expectation. Until for some, not for everybody, but some people find themselves like, man, what am I going to do? Right? Because now you have to sit with yourself, and there is no classroom. There's no teacher. There's no guide. There's no measure. Your parents might have backed all the way off and like, you're an adult now, figure it out. Right. And it's like, then I got to really figure it out. Like, who am I now? What do I want to be? Right. And I think that sometimes we don't really take into account what impact that lays on us when we go through these different systems, these shared experiences through time, and how it shapes us, right? Because I think about that. Like I think about how in school, right, I felt the need to want to speak up and speak out. Oftentimes just been having conversations, and it's like, oh, you talk too much. And it's like, well, I'm a communicator. But if I let you dictate to me, I'm a troublemaker, right?
Right.
And then it's like, okay, well, how much of me is it disrupting class, or how much of me is this processing what's going on in the moment? And I think it's just sometimes we got to be critical and reflective on who we are as individuals to really see like how can this inform us for tomorrow? Because guess what? When you working, you don't get a grade, right? You gonna do a job either better or the same or worse than somebody else, and you gonna get paid the same. Certain instances you may not, but most entry level jobs, guess what? You gonna get paid the same. Matter of fact, you could have all the expertise and the experience come into a new position and look to the left and to the right of you and be like, they get paid more than me, right? And that's the thing, right? It's not about a grade, right? It's literally now we're doing it in this transactional format, right? Where it's like, oh, I'm associating my self worth, whether you want to see it or not, to how much I'm able to survive. Because it ain't about the money. It's literally the amount of freedom this money grants you, right? Can I live where I want to live? Can I go where I want to go? Can I buy what I need or want to buy? Right.
Right.
And that's different than the idea of I go to school to get some grades. Because regardless, my life is my life with the difference in grades or not. If I got it, I got it. If I don't, I do. And then it's like, well, who are you now? Right. And I feel like being present is that communication, that consistency to letting whoever know, letting that child know, or telling yourself, who are you going to be today? Right. And being one with that.
Yeah, and I think also like learning what your options are, you know, in the roles that you can play. And I think, that's part of what growing up is saying, you know, I want to try to show up for people in this way. I want to try to show up for myself in this way. I want to try to show up for my family in this way, right? And there's all these motivations, right? Or these people that I want to represent, right? Or that I want to impact. And as I'm figuring out who I want to impact, it helps me decide who I want to be. And with any of us, it can be a little daunting and like a task, uh, that can be intimidating when we come to the knowledge that we have to choose or that we get to choose. Uh, and sometimes that choice, that those options, right, are overwhelming for people in it, right, society or culture or the community choose for them, right, or a teacher, right, choose the narrative for the student, for the individual, to the point where they say, right, you talk a lot, so you're a troublemaker, disruptive to the order that I'm, as a teacher, trying to um, manage. And if we accept that context that's given to us instead of choosing, right, or like you said, being critical of self and saying, this is who I am, right, and then being accepting of that person and saying, okay, if it's a foreshadowing or foretelling or a clue into how to navigate in the future, I can say, well, the theme of me being a communicator, right, is prevalent throughout my life. But the way that I communicate, the reasons why I communicate, and who I choose, whom I choose to communicate to, also have themes. And I can be critical of those things as well. Critical of my reasons, critical of who I communicate to, critical of how I communicate. And if I continue to be critical of those things and reflective, I can even, increase and form that identity even more to the point to where whether I'm home or I'm sheltered, I feel sheltered and safe, or whether I step outside and I have to be on alert and on guard, I have idea, I have a stronger idea of who I am and how I want to make impact or how I want to guard against someone impacting me in a way that can harm me.
And you said, being aware, safety concerns, head on swivel. Ain't nothing make you more alert than that sound of a pop. That's like that ain't no firework. That ain't no backfire from a car. That's that's something else, right? Ain't nothing make you more alert than somebody when they walk up to you and they pull their pants up like where you from, right? Then
Oh
that
yeah,
make you more alert, right?
yeah,
Then seeing them blue and red lights in the back of the car, you're gonna be real present and anticipating the future at the same time, right? And I say it laughingly because that's how I process all the trauma that goes behind those words. It's through laughter. It's not the same for everybody. It's not to minimize it for anyone, but I'm keeping it real. When you talking about being present and being alert, you could recall any one of those moments of adversity where it's like, oh, this is where we at, right? Where you from? Oh, what are you doing out so late? Why were you speeding? Right? Each one of those, they invoke a certain of awareness, alertness, a certain capacity for being in a moment, right? Because you realize how fragile the present can be in those moments,
yeah.
right?
And sometimes the fragile, right? The fragility is not always in threat, right? When you need to be alert. Sometimes, right? It's in a place of joy, right? And it makes an impact on you. And you're able to recall in that same way because you're just as alert then, right, as you were when, right, when you're threatened, right? When life is right is right can be taken away just like that when it's so precious and so fleeting, right? The danger and the excitement, right, are both fleeting and can be right and can be taken out, just as quickly on either side. But that's also when you're at your most alert, right? And there's either like some relief, there's some triumph, right? Or there's some defeat that has happened in those moments that set precedents for how you navigate future future moments, future similar situations, or at least situations that invoke that alertness.
Practice being present, because I mean it's when you, especially when you introduce that other side, right, going from us from like the fragility in multi dimensions, right, how
Right,
fragile something is. Like, think about that first crush and that moment where you knew you was going to communicate what they meant to you, right, and that sense of being present, right? You feel I mean, everybody gonna react differently. Somebody gonna lie. They gonna be like, I was smooth with it, but really, we know you was sweating on your back. And you was like, oh, I got to control my breathing because I'm getting a little heavy breath. So, you know what I'm saying? It's one of those things where you got to really take into account that this plays itself out in a multitude of ways, being present, right? Because sometimes we get so consumed with anticipation, or so consumed with that heightened sense of awareness or anxiety, that we will fluster ourselves with so much that we don't give ourselves room to just respond to what's necessary in the moment. Because I think about that, right, where it's like I can recall when I'm no longer being present. I'm not giving myself to a situation because I'm thinking about either something I want down the road instead of, well, what's going on in front of me, right?
right,
Am I being receptive to myself and being aware? And am I communicating to those around me? That's another thing. Like, sometimes
right,
we be in the present, we don't even let people know what the present is for us. And
right.
we just have
What
this
am I
this
experiencing? Oh, totally.
come
Go ahead.
on. I'm just saying, it's one of those things though. It's like, am I even letting you in on what the present looks like for me, to really make it genuine, to make it real, right? Because sometimes we in our ether, right, our own internal dialogue of vacuums, and we don't let nobody know what's happening. And sometimes it we get lost in that, not realizing that there's others are being impacted by it, right? How we communicate what the present need is for us is important too, because we don't, sometimes we're afraid to, sometimes we're afraid and we're anticipating their reaction, right? Sometimes we don't give ourselves enough time to create the practice of approach, right? To really break it down and let things play out. We then start saying, well, I knew how you was gonna respond. Right? I knew this is how you was gonna act. I knew this is what you were gonna say. Right. And it's like, that ain't always necessary. Sometimes it needs to happen as it is. And sometimes it doesn't need to happen how you think it may come out, right? Like, we let the words speak for themselves versus the feeling, the tonality, the what is our want, right? Right. What am I looking to gain after this versus I need this for myself, right? I need this in the moment. Letting you know, whether you're my significant other or my friend or my family member, how am I communicating what the present looks like to me, so you can be in the present with me, right? It may be different outcomes for you, but you're in the present with me, because sometimes my present moment ain't always reflective of what you see on my face. It isn't always reflective of what may look like yesterday or may look typical to you, may
Right,
not be the case, right? And that goes for the good and for the bad, because it's just right. We've had conversations so far regarding all the different tragedies and the moments, and how life happens fast, things move quick, and we're not always aware of how those little instances play out in the larger scheme of things. And this ain't by no means saying we gurus. This just means we live in and we share these experiences together, and we have been able to find similarities in what we find joy and happiness and success in, and sharing that. Right? It's a
true.
refinement. Right? immaculate, incredible, just smooth mass that you see isn't always been here. This took time to develop, right? These gold teeth, these took time to develop. And this is the refinement of those things manifested through these words. And so when I'm talking about being present, I'm trying to invoke a certain level of thought that we always don't have a conversation about. How often, I mean, think about it. When the last time you had a conversation with someone about being present?
Well, in my profession,
Okay, in your profession, never mind. But
well,
actually in your profession,
like,
let them
you know,
know.
right? So like, no, like for real, because not it's not everybody who does what I do approaches the job, right, or the exchange or the appointment the same way. Um, and it's not always what you do, it's how you do it, right? Um, because I could probably do the do the job differently, or I could have a different job and do it how I do this job. Um, and so for me, as a service provider, it's a I'm regularly trying to encourage people to focus in on what they can process. And a lot of times that means me acknowledging that they're processing something somewhere else. And sometimes the arrival into the present doesn't happen instantaneously. Sometimes it takes 5 minutes into the appointment, right? Sometimes it takes, 10 minutes into the session to where sometimes it's a whole 50-minute process for them to arrive at that space, right, where they're aware of what's happening in the moment and they're taking in what's there around them, not what's to come or what's, past already. And I try to encourage folks that whenever you get there in your day, it's of value because then you have some momentum to build on to practice it again. And if it takes all of the session for us to arrive at the place where you're focused on the present, then we're better for it. And that allows you then to become the expert, right? That now have that knowledge of self, but how is the self being affected by the environment and atmosphere, and then how is the atmosphere and environment being impacted and affected by the self, right? Like when you're younger, you don't necessarily have to worry about like how you're impacting others until you're in community, and that's what families are for. That's what, right, interactions and friends and communities and neighborhoods are for. That's what tribes are for, is to learn those behaviors that impact positively and learn what those behaviors are that impact negatively. And sometimes you're in a situation to where no matter how you react or respond, the feedback that you get is can be harmful and critical, and it can develop, right, like barriers to being the whole self. But I just ordered this halal, guys, so I'm in gratitude right now.
Hey, if you gotta be in the present. You gotta enjoy what you got. Your meals, your nutrients. It's vital. It's necessary. It's essential. But yeah, as you said, right, in your line of work, it is different being present and being aware of how these outside pressures or these outside influences are playing a role and playing a factor. But in my line of work,
Yeah, yeah.
right, looking at it from being at service to the community, trying to support others and gaining resources. I keep these different tenets and pillars paramount and at the forefront, right? Harm reduction, trauma informed care, social emotional learning, universal design. Really take into account what do people need, right? When I say universal design, I'm talking about, I don't like using the word disabilities. I call it different abilities, right? That's
Yes.
just what it is. It's different abilities. We all have different abilities. We have
Straight up.
different attributes, right? And so working with people with different abilities is creating space for everything as much as I can to be accessible, right? Now, I'm a creative person, but I also understand the balance between kind of what are vital to people growing, what are necessary to their sense of independence or their sense of like livelihood, because I remember when I didn't have, and I remember when I did have, and I remember the things it took for me to sustain what I had and what it meant when those things became disrupted and I didn't have it, right? And so I leveraged my experience and I leveraged what was taught to me to give other people the opportunity to get that, but I also am mindful of how I'm delivering that message, right? So here, yeah, it's I'm wearing a mask, it's goatee. There's a lot of different variations and reasons as to why,
Right.
right? Think deeper, think critically, right? As you know, it's critical, and it goes both ways. It sometimes can be critical and harmful. Sometimes it can be critical for the sense of looking at it for the details, right? That deeper meaning, right? That's about being present on both ends. But now from universal design, we're talking about social emotional learning, right? The what are the social dynamics that play into your development and your emotional state and how that impacts your ability to retain that information, right? We oftentimes are in environments that could be elevated or heightened, or
Right.
sometimes they're just the energy isn't there for me to feel good, right? Maybe I've experienced a loss, maybe I've experienced a trauma or an adverse situation, maybe I've just had extreme joy, maybe I just won something, maybe whatever just happened totally minimizes everything else I'm supposed to do in someone else's eyes, right? I mean, for instance, if I win the lotto, my job don't mean as much. Think about that. That can happen in a multitude of ways across the spectrum, right? So now we're going from social emotional, right, to trauma informed care, right? Because then we talk about social emotional and the things that can impact you, right? Those outside factors, the trauma that's then put on you, right? What am I going to do to care for you if I witness it, if I know it, if you shared it, right? How am I going to be receptive to be there for you, right? Because I want to make sure that I'm not just adding more harm to the plate, right? I want to make sure I'm not adding more trauma, right? Which then brings me to harm reduction, right? How do I reduce the harm in the things that I do, right? These are concepts we don't, or at least when I talk to youth, when I talk to others who don't work in the field that I work in, they're not commonplace, right? They're
Right.
not things that are accessible or brought up, but they're necessary, right? Like they're so important because I learned when I engaged with these different things and I started incorporating it in my own life and my own practice, that it was able to repair a lot of the harm, the trauma, the damage, or unlearning that needed to happen, right? And so
Right.
being present is also making sure that I'm using those tools to support others around me, not only myself, right? I was raised in a way that showed me the importance of being a responsible member of society or being a responsible member of my community. I didn't understand how significant it was going to be as time went on, but you look at the news, you be present in that, you start to see things, right? You start to realize that there's plots of land that are being given, right? Or being used that may not necessarily need to be used, right? And I
Right.
reflect on my past and I'm like, oh, I remember what happened at Hunters Point with PG&E. I remember what happened with Midway Village and PG&E. I remember the impact and the trauma. And I now know how to be receptive when someone tells me this is what they're experiencing now, right? I'm a little bit more aware of where they can go, what can be done about it, or just sitting in the moment with them to be present, right? It comes full circle, right? Understanding that everything impacts everything, right? Nothing lives in isolation. We like to say, but it's not true. We have to
Yeah.
be mindful, right? The fire impacts the water impacts the earth impacts the air, right? All these
Air impacts the
things.
fire.
Exactly. It goes. That's what it is, right? And oftentimes it's like What that got to do with me? Well, let me tell you, if you've ever had a complaint, you've ever had a moment of frustration, you've ever had an adversity or something that you didn't want to happen, then sometimes you got to realize, where do I need to go to resolve that, right? Sometimes it's with you, sometimes it was someone else, but at all times, it's in the present. And I think that that's something that's, maybe I'm wrong. I'm okay. Let me be wrong. I'd rather fail forward, right, than to fall behind in the same monotony of routines that we get lost in, right? I'm here to have these conversations because I just didn't see them a lot growing up, right? I didn't
Right.
see them happening as a normalcy, right? Sometimes we are given things to talk about, and that's okay. But if we could also sometimes provoke conversation in different ways, I think that's also okay as well. It's just, being a black person, right? Being a black and Latin person, right? Being in San Francisco or being from an inner city and seeing how the world can be, they try to take you out of the moment, right? They try to
So many
inoculate
ways,
you.
in so many ways, in so many forms, in so many methods, right? Methods, really. That's what it is, a strategy, right? To take you from what's happening on the internal, right? To focus on the external in so many forms, whether, right, it's even your hunger can take you out of what's happening in the moment, right? As I order this food, right? It's like even your hunger, right? So if it's doing it for me, right, right, 3 decades plus into this life, imagining what it's doing for the person 3 years into life, right? Or the person, 13 weeks into life, because the struggle can start very early. Food safety can be a problem, right? Very, very early in life. Again, take you out of right. Again, take you out of the moment, take you out of what's happening internally, take you out what's happening in your environment, um, right? Shaping or misshaping at times, right? How development happens. Um, but it's so many, like, from violence, the threat of violence, to drugs, to abuse, like all these different forms of abuse. Um, it's like when you go into school and you don't know that you have classmates, right, who are victims of trafficking, right? But you're trying to navigate and communicate and exist in this world, but you got people around you who are hurting, and it's dictating how they show up.
I mean, look, you got people who don't even know they victims,
True.
but
Oh,
they acting out in a way where they're victims, right? There's people who are victims won't even accept they're victims after someone's tried to acknowledge they victims, right? I don't mean to just say it like that. We got people who have it, who don't even realize they have it, right? We got people who are in positions where they don't have to think about it and they are never aware of it, right? They never have that reflective moment, right? So insulated from everything else, and we're all coming together in this one space, right? It's the same thing at work, right? We oftentimes be like, "Oh, you an adult, but what kind of life did you live to like lead you here? You might have survived, but did you learn? Did you grow? Did you get? Did they deliver it in a way that you could keep it?" Right? Oftentimes we want to just point the finger, right? And be like, well, that's your problem. Is it? If you didn't even, if no one asked you to be here, right?
man,
Like, being really present is seeing through all those layers and knowing how to get to it, to get to the core of it, to reveal it, to then be able to, like, let's deal with it. Right? That's like, this ain't nothing new. This is the only difference is maybe the access, right? The access for it is maybe like, come on, we right now speaking to you live, right, from whatever corner of the world you're in, right?
Right.
We are fortunate enough to be able to share with you, but let's really be clear, right? This, as we move into the future, and this ability to share this information, to start these conversations, to be able to exchange these ideas and experiences and facilitate space for us to heal, like this is a revolution, right? People sometimes can't accept it. Sometimes they get lost in it, right? You might want to hate on somebody for whatever reason, not knowing where that hate comes from within yourself. But I feel like being present gives you access to address that because it ain't necessary. Sometimes we feel like it is because we come from it, right? It was given to us, it was familiar. But just because it's familiar don't make it sustainable. Doesn't make it healthy, right? Doesn't mean that it ain't toxic. Sometimes we be toxic crusaders. We come up out of the toxic swamp lands. We don't even realize it, right? We just think that's the norm. And then we judge another person for not having gone through it. You don't share my pain. You don't get it. But how do you convey it? Right. And sometimes I get it. You may not have the patience. That's true too. Nothing wrong with that. Know your capacity, know your space, know what you need to do to take care of you. But you don't have to go and harm the next person, right? I don't see self defense as harm. I see self defense as you defending yourself, right? But if that means that you walking around like a raw nerve and you just willing to pounce on any and everything around you,
Yeah.
is it self defense or is it that you so traumatized like a police dog that's been through many drug wars and so many different instances that was told you need to do this because we need you to do it. You obey your master, right? And then when it's time to go be at home, you're not able to decompress because you always on high alert,
Right.
right? The toxins have taken over, right? What's needed for your survival, you've the hormones, the endorphins, all the things that are there are corrupting away in your
Put it
mind. Now you
put you
can't
at a
even
chemical
respond.
imbalance.
Present, being present, right? And I'm not judging, I'm just saying if you can disrupt it, if you can intervene, if you could find some level of intervention or introduce something that can cut in the way, or maybe you see it happening to someone else,
That's it.
maybe, just maybe, you could be of support in a different direction for some healing, right? Because I mean, we talking about being present by all accounts. It's also about like being mindful of the world we live in and where is it headed, where is it going, right? I know we oftentimes, right, we think, oh, the worst is behind us. Um, if this past year, 12 months, 13 and counting has shown me anything, don't you ever take time for granted. Don't you ever take being present for granted because you will find yourself in very different circumstances. Um, the future is always evolving, right? We don't go backwards. That's just how it's always been. So, being present is your ability to access the infinite because it's always there, it's always available.
Right.
Being present is all we have, right? Sometimes our present can lead to other things, but it's what we do with these moments that make that difference, right? I mean, we could make it all so simple and be like, oh man, I should have invested all that money in Dogcoin in the past. Oh, I could have been a bajillionaire. But let's be real, like, what you gonna do today? Right? You gonna keep looking at what you could have did, or you gonna do something? Right?
Right.
I ain't saying go
Access.
wild, right?
No, but you saying right. Access. Right. What the infinite. Right. Access what's here. Right. You sitting here with all the possibilities. Right. I'm sitting here with all the possibilities. Right. There's no need for me to focus on what's past when I have every choice available to me now. Right. And if I don't have access to something now, right, how do I, right, take note of that, right, and then create the access or pursue the access, right? Do I look at my resources and say, from here, I can make a choice to be at point B.
Choices, choices and decisions, decisions and choices. That's all we got. Choices and decisions, decisions and choices. It's some of us don't. I'll acknowledge that. I'll give you space for that. It's real. Some of you don't. Some of you do. hopefully enough of us can where it extends and everyone can have some choices and decisions. It's yeah, it's just a thing that I really look at in the scope of the wider lens of the world, right? How are we as individuals coming together as one lyrical ones, episode 48, being present and thinking about, right, what is it that we want for ourselves and each other? Because ain't nothing like being able to enjoy it with others, enjoy it with your people, enjoy it with your family, your friends. Ain't nothing like that shared sense of joy, that elation, that reverb of like happiness, right? That echo
Yes.
chamber of laughter,
Right.
right? And I think being present gives us a chance to access that incredible amount of energy and to sustain it. I remember someone saying, like, you don't know what that's like. Like you need to go and find out. And it's like, wait, are you saying they need to go experience this traumatic instance that you went through as a rite of passage? Because I don't think that's necessary. But what I do think is necessary is us to be able to share this joy together, right? To be able to share this moment of happiness, of bliss, of something that is gonna feed you in a way that it's like it's gonna make you get further and further away from that thing you may think everybody else needs to experience. Like,
Yeah.
ain't nothing wrong with innocence. Ain't nothing wrong with trying to preserve that. But to promote corruption, to promote that you should be corrupted, how sick are we? How sick am I? Right? How crazy can it be for a kid to grow up in his own community, want to take care of his community, but be turned away because the stakeholders who have been in positions of power for years and decades say it's not a viable option. But you've been in this position for 15, 20 years and you going to tell this child, "Oh, I don't think this is a good move." But they want to take care of their community. They may not understand totally, but you should give them space to figure it out.
Right.
And it's just these are the things in the present tense that I see, right? Because I think, yes, being in the present can help shift those conversations, can help shift those narratives, right? I keep looking at Dan Price every day, talk about I made 70K, a standard wage for everyone in my company, and this is what it's changed, and this is how it's benefited people. And he just hit people with the 4-day work week and the benefits of that. And I'm like, being in the present, I need to bring this up, right? If I could see it, I gotta speak it. I gotta say something to it because it might
Right.
just happen. Because I'm like, maybe you gonna get access. Maybe that'll help somebody else in their journey, they path, right? Oh, I heard so and so got 4-day work weeks.
Right.
What it do over here, right?
Right.
I'm just saying in the present moment, I'm trying to make change. I ain't
And
saying you
as
trying. I'm just
right.
saying I'm trying, and I
And
want the
as
changes to be
creatives,
for everybody.
right, and as creatives and entrepreneurs, right, how do we create, and unlearn the system that we're in that we grew up in, to create a system that's more beneficial, more balanced, more equitable than, the 5-day work week or the 40-hour work week, like, or just people working in, in positions that take from them instead of working for companies that give to them, that benefit them.
Give, give to you. I'm just, I mean, I be in a giving mood, but what I got to give is the abundance of my energy that I have, you know, right here with you. For those looking, comment, right? Let us know, what do you think about, like, what does it mean for you to be present? Is it even important? Does it even hold anything in your wheelhouse of life? Like, does that hold any space to be present? Right? Maybe you too consumed with the past. Maybe you too consumed with the future. But like, what does the present mean to you, and how does that shape your day to day? Because I think it's important, like, to get that insight. Right? If you're watching now, put it in the dialogue. Like, put it in the comment. Like, what does it mean? Because I think it's important to know how it shapes you in this present moment. We in the present together now, right? And I'm like, I'm ever mindful that this isn't a one-way conversation. This is communal, right? I hold space, and what I'm saying is, in what I do, I'm leveraging my time, my experiences, and the access that I have to the opportunities before me or that have been given to me to give others the ability to do the same. Right. I can see where I'm fortunate and I can see the deficits of what I lack, and I'm growing. I plan on and continue to make the necessary changes to see the fruits of my labor. Right. But I'm also willing to share that fruit. But I want to know, like, what does present look like to other people? What does being present mean to you? How can you incorporate it? Do you incorporate it? What is the best practices? Because it's how we grow. It's how we're able to come together and extend beyond the circumstances that have been presented to us. A random fact. I know this is totally like non sequitur. This has nothing to do with anything. I just recently saw a map of Broadmoor inside Daly City, and I realized Broadmoor is its own township, and Daly City is a donut. We're from San Francisco, California, and Daly City is the neighboring city to San Francisco in the Northern California Peninsula region. And I was looking at a map and I was like, why is the border of this city look like a donut? And I realized there's a city within the city. So, that's just a random piece of information, me being present in a moment and thinking about it, because I was just like bewildered by that fact. But, Alfluent, what about you? What else is, I mean, as the halal guys come through and drop it off, when
They right there, bro.
they right there, but like right there where? You know what I'm
They're
saying?
like right like 4 minutes away,
Yeah, four
four to
minutes. See,
6 minutes away. But I'm concerned because it didn't take but like a few minutes from the confirmation to when the dasher took off. So I'm like, oh, do they even have my food? Or was it just they was wrapping up and the food was already cooked and they just piled as much food in there as possible? I hope they gave me some extra stuff. I don't know. It's a little iffy. But
I mean,
in the
these are all the
present,
things you got to take into consideration.
right? But
You see how
it's
appetite can pull you out of the present moment and make you
it
anticipate everything in the future.
right, exactly. Right, and that's kind of why I wanted to stay with it for that reason because it is like totally taking me out of the moment. But
Did I get to the cookout in time, or am I late, or am I early? Did they start
am I
cooking, or
early?
they already cooking? Who got their plate? Who don't got their plate? Did they just put the dogs on, or did they got the burgers too? They got the ribs. What we doing?
Right. Oh, a deer. Right. As I'm on my way to my destination, right. Let me taking into account what's in front of me, right, versus what's ahead of me. And
Deer.
right, right. Remember, folks. It's it's the law to hit the animal instead of avoid the animal to cause an accident.
Those are the critical decisions one must make in the present, right? Critical decisions one must make in the present. Like, what do you do? Because we say it, but when the
Right.
present actually plays out, it's much different,
Right. Do I
right?
really want to mess up my car?
Do
Do
I
I
really want
really
to go
want to?
through this animal? Is this animal really going to go through me? What's going to happen?
Right.
I mean, any other thoughts for the people when it comes to being present in a moment, Affluent?
Uh, yeah. Actually, it's I believe it's important to just acknowledge your own bandwidth and sometimes take it in steps. Um, in your practice of being present and being mindful, you can always start with being still and looking at what's in the room, looking at what's in front of you, directly in front of you. Starting with your sight, right, and ending with what you feel, or starting with what you feel, then what you hear, and ending with what you see. Right. However you do it, it's valid, and again, it can build build momentum. I think when it comes to being in the present, it changes the way you see the world, and it changes the way you respond, I think, to the world, because all that matters is that moment, and it can heighten the experience in a moment, and also become a stronger teaching moment for someone next to you, right? Or a stronger bonding moment for someone next to you, right? If you're fully present. And I think when we're talking about showing up in community and being there for each other, being present is one of those things that is highly effective. And the more advice you get about being present, um, the more it can be unraveled for you.
No, it's real. Um, you know, I can only say thank you, everyone, anyone who takes the time to listen, anybody who chooses to be with us. Whether you're listening to the audio only version or you're able to experience this live or you're able to catch a viewing of it, you know, you are appreciated. We wanted to start the conversation because we felt like there was something lacking in the space of being a person of color in the world and having a conversation and dialogue around how do we repair ourselves, how do we repair our community, how do we grow, how do we heal together, and being present in this moment, giving the gratitude to say thank you for giving us space to do this, and joining us on this journey, because now we episode 48 in this thing, and who knows what's next. And as you've been able to see, if you've been with us rocking for a minute, you can see, man, we done came a ways way, a ways away.
Yeah, we
I'm
we
like,
come we come pretty far, and I think I am in gratitude every time I'm here, um, because I think for me, whether I'm a brother, a friend, a son, a partner, a coworker, a classmate, a student, or a teacher, I am regularly trying to create a safe space for people to experience and be their whole self, in everything that they are, and explore what that is and accept what that is and then challenge what that is, um, and learn more about, who they are, in the moment, but, create a safe space to be vulnerable. And sometimes vulnerable is not always what you're struggling with. Sometimes it's what you're happy about, what you're grateful for, what you're joyous about. Sometimes, it's what you're frustrated with. Being vulnerable sometimes is, what you may be dreading, or just in the moment, what you're aware of, and being honest about what you're aware of, or what you're, again, like you said, what you don't see, right? You can be honest about what you don't see, and that's okay too.
well said, well put. As we often do at this time, as we go for whatever's supposed to be coming in the delivery.
Yeah, it's outside somewhere. I have to go hunt for it. One, 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 one.